Welcome to Eddie's Launchpads, the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, carers, teachers and schools. We are the primary school that teaches children to be ready, be safe, be respectful, and never forget to dream, believe, and shine.
This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure.
Okay, Eddie, start the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
Part of the Hampton Academies Trust.
Yes, welcome back to Eddie's Launchpads. It's the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools, wherever you're listening, around the country, around the world. Thank you for joining us today. We're so grateful to all of our listeners. You may not actually be in school. You may not have a child at school. It doesn't matter. The main thing is we have great guests on here, all from all walks of life and some great places to visit. And I mention that because I have got two gentlemen sitting in a boardroom. I don't know whether I'm going to be fired at the end of it, but they're in a boardroom on a wonderful railway that they're going to tell us all about. Welcome to the show, Malcolm and Ian.
Hello. Hello there.
You're on a wonderful heritage railway that is not that far away from Peterborough. It's easily accessible, and in actual fact, Mrs. Waters and I have been on your railway many, many times. Can you tell us a little bit about your heritage railway, a little bit about how it all began?
Absolutely, I can. And Peterborough's not far away at all, just an hour away from Loughborough, where we are based. So the Great Central Railway, as you say, is a fantastic heritage railway. We're 8 miles long. We run through some lovely countryside between Loughborough and the outskirts of Leicester. And uniquely for a heritage railway, we used to be a main line. Most steam heritage railways are branch lines, so relatively secondary routes, very pretty, very nice normally. But we're actually a mainline railway, which makes us unique, and we've got a double track, so you can experience trains passing, steam trains passing on a double track, which you can't experience anywhere else in the world today. So we're unique in that regard.
Yeah, it is a wonderful place to visit, and we're going to be talking about ways in which schools can get involved as well, and maybe visit you. But I think that we found you completely by accident, really. We were looking at local places to visit, and of course we've got the Nene Valley Railway locally, which we support and attend. But then we thought, well, let's go and have a look at what you offer, and we came over to have a meal on your Pullman train, and it was such a wonderful event. But it was so atmospheric, because one of the strengths, I think, of your railway is that you've got several stations, and they're all geared up for different ages, aren't they?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we've got 4 stations on the railway. 3 of them are original from the beginning. I'll tell you a bit about the history of the railway in a short time. But they're all set in different periods. Starting from the Edwardian period, where we've got a gaslit station set in around about 1912, a beautiful country station that tells the story of what it might have been like to try to travel at that time. Very atmospheric. And then we've got another which is set in wartime Britain, It features a dig for victory garden, so produce being made on the station for the local station staff, and no doubt people living in the vicinity of the station, but also a whole load of other ephemera that's relevant to the wartime period. We've got another set in the 1950s for many, the heyday of steam travel in Britain, and then finally another one in the 1960s. So you can see quite a spectrum of different periods of the Great Central.
And in terms of Office for Schools, that range of historic context is marvellous, because either within one day children can see a range of different periods, or if they've got a very specific interest, for example, the home front during World War II, we've got a site which is absolutely tailor-made for a day alongside ride on the train. So having that variety of periods is excellent from the educational perspective.
How did you first start with the Heritage Railway? How did it all begin?
It was opened in 1899, which was right at the end of the Victorian railway revolution, a boom in railways that occurred over the period from the 1830s right through to the end of the 19th century. It was the brainchild of a man called Edward Watkin, who was a parliamentarian and a railway manager. And he had a vision of joining together railways that he already managed in the north of England, that served the ports on the east coast of Grimsby. In fact, it was him and his railway that largely created Grimsby and the seaside destination of Cleethorpes. They're all thanks to the coming of the railway, and Manchester, and connecting those markets with the south of England. And the same man was already the chairman of the Metropolitan Railway, which is of course now the Metropolitan line on the tube, and he wanted to join all that together, and he devised this London extension, which connected as far south as his railways had got to at that point, which was somewhere in the Nottinghamshire coalfields, through to Buckinghamshire at the north end of the Metropolitan line, and that became his London extension, and later known as the Great Central Railway, and opened in 1899 as the most modern railway of its day, and it had very gentle gradients and very gentle curves, which meant high speed was possible. And when it opened, the slogan was rapid travel in luxury, and there were a great many express trains that would run on the route with on-train catering on every train, which was a revelation in those days, and was extremely popular. But of course, the money came from, or a lot of the money came from moving goods around, coal in particular, but also bringing fish from the Grimsby ports to the people of London. And it enjoyed a bit of a heyday in those first few decades, but then after the war, it became much more difficult for the railways in general. Run down after the war, followed quickly by nationalisation, at which point the rot began to set in. And in the 1950s, with the rise of the motor car and the coming of the motorway, it was realised the Great Central Railway duplicated other routes. Because there was already a main line to Leicester and to Loughborough and to Nottingham and to Sheffield and Manchester, and as a consequence, it was not economic to try to keep multiple railways running, serving the same destination, and it turned out to be the biggest and most significant of the beaching cuts. And as you rightly point out, the line was severed. There are various bits of it that are still in operational use today, predominantly the south end, serving the home counties into London. But the bit through Leicestershire that we look after was closed in 1968. So that's how the railway came into being, had a relatively short life, and then ultimately was closed. But there were a group of local campaigners that wanted to save a portion of this railway for future generations. And in 1969, they began that campaign to save gradually bits of the railway, and ultimately succeeded in saving the 8 miles that we look after today, running from Loughborough through to the outskirts of Leicester. And it's their legacy that we're very thankful for, that we're able to continue to look after and to grow today.
It's not just about steam trains on a line. Your beautiful stations, the architecture and the way that it's designed actually adds to it. So these guys who started the line, who built this heritage railway, they didn't just do the line. That's the amazing thing. It's the things that you see from the window that make the trip even more enjoyable.
Absolutely, and that actually was credit to the vision of some of those early pioneers and those of the team here today that continue on that journey. They wanted not only just to operate trains and to bring steam back to Leicestershire, but also to recreate something of what are fascinating social periods of social history that the railways were a huge part of, hence that we've got stations in the different periods, and there's been so much energy and effort poured into getting the stations looking the way they are, and we're very, very proud of them. And it's wonderful to think that, that Loughborough Central, our biggest station, the guy here who's in charge of the restoration and maintenance of that station is one of the original people whose vision it was that saved the station back in the late 1960s, and that's a testament really to the commitment of these volunteers to keep the railway going.
Absolutely.
You've talked about passenger trains, and you've talked about wonderful stations. Something else that makes the Great Central almost unique among heritage railways is the extent to which we run demonstration freight trains and demonstration coal trains. We've got nearly 100 freight vehicles of various descriptions, and we run them regularly alongside and with our passenger services. So visitors really experience what a mainline railway was, particularly this part of the world where the freight was just as important as the passengers were.
Having those two lines side by side allows you to do that, I guess.
Absolutely, and we can do it in. We could do it with a single line running goods trains, but being able to have them passing passenger trains is a completely unique experience today that genuinely recreates an experience that was commonplace 60, 70 years ago.
One thing that might interest the adults who are listening, and particularly we've got folk who come over from America. Hello, if you all of our listeners listening in Iowa and New York, you often come onto the show and you make comments and things to send us emails and things. If you're ever over in England, then look up this fantastic railway because it offers such amazing things. One of the things that amazes me partly is the fact that you've got so many volunteers who give up their own time on the railway, and thank you if you're one of those volunteers. Is the Pullman meals that we've had on the train, we have thoroughly enjoyed, and they're actually cooked on the train, and when they come to your table, you're genuinely taken back to the, forgive me folks, the good old days when you can sit and have a really good cooked meal, 3 courses, thoroughly enjoyed it. They stop right by the reservoir, so you can look across the reservoir while you're having some of your meal, which is handy for me because I've got the shakes and I'll finish up with soup all down me. So Mrs. Walters says to me, that's going down your shirt. So it's nice to have a nice quiet carriage to be able to enjoy our meal. And what amazes me is it always comes out piping hot.
The dining service is a fantastic experience. I was going to comment on that, actually, when you mentioned it earlier. We're really proud of it.
Yeah.
And some of our meals, you can have more than 3 courses as well. Our Charnwood Forest on a Saturday evening is a 5-course meal, which is really sumptuous and very nice. But yeah, it's all cooked on the train, very traditionally, using gas in the kitchen cars. And the kitchen cars date from the 1950s. and 60s, although they've got modern kit in them now that meet modern standards and are a bit more efficient. But yeah, everything's cooked on board, and then very quickly served at seat to ensure that, of course, that it remains hot. But I'm really pleased to hear that you enjoyed your experience, and we've continued to try to develop and innovate in our on-train dining in a few ways, actually. One is that we recently created what we think is a first, and that's an accessible dining coach for people in wheelchairs. And it's exactly the same beautiful environment with the same seat coverings and so on that you'd see in any of the other coaches, but just that it's accessible for people who are in wheelchairs. We've also responded to the market, and what we've seen a change in the way that people are dining, particularly after the COVID pandemic, and much more interested in experiences, I think, rather than going out for a multi-course meal. So, afternoon teas are now extremely popular. We can't seem to sell enough of those or put enough trains on with afternoon tea on, whereas some of our other more traditional trains have seen a bit of a drop-off. We're experimenting with other types of experiences, comedy nights and that sort of thing. And we've introduced a new train that's a bit more like a gastropub meal than a traditional on-train dining meal, but still retaining many of the features that you described that makes first-class on-train dining so special. And that's been going really well. But the first-class dining for us it's important. It's really important to me for a couple of reasons. One is that it's as much as we can a faithful recreation of what was a really important part of rail travel back in the heyday of steam in the 1950s. But secondly, as you mentioned, the railway is run by volunteers. We're a not-for-profit organisation, which is something that we do very well. We're very good at not making a profit, because running a heritage railway is an expensive affair. But we do this because we're attempting to preserve a really important part of the nation's heritage for the benefit of the community and for our visitors, and of course for our volunteers. And the dining trains bring in really important income, the proceeds of which of course go to support the wider effort of keeping the railway going. So really, really important to us, those dining trains, and they continue to be successful.
Folks, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about going over, go over, because it is like I'm sure that some of you have seen Poirot, when he travels on his trains. They have people in full dress who stand there and book you on the train. They take you to your seat. You have this wonderful, wonderful table, wonderful seating to enjoy. And we've been over. I've lost count the number of times we've been, but I can remember two in particular. One was a very, very, very hot day. And yet they still brought out the meal, and you wouldn't have known what it must have been like for the people cooking. Must have been horrendous. But it was so hot. I mean, we were all hot in the carriages. What it was like in the kitchen, goodness knows. But I remember that when they bought the butter, they tried to keep it cold, but by the time they got to the table, the butter was melting in the pack that it was in. So it was really difficult, but still the meal was first class, and so I remember that. And we came over on another time in the autumn. And this links back to one of your stations. There's one of your stations that's I don't know if it is gaslit. It certainly looks like it's gaslit. And it was a very foggy autumnal night, and we'd had our meal and we were going back for one last time. And I looked at it and I said to Mrs. Walters, now look at that station. There is no way, if this train stopped, it looks so spooky, with all of the mist and the sort of thing you see in a horror film where somebody gets off the train. You know what it's like, listeners? Somebody gets off the train in this ghostly place. And you think, why are you getting off there? I would not go. And as the train went by, and it didn't stop for us to get off because it was going back to Loughborough. But as it went back, the atmosphere of that station, it was incredible. The lighting, the way that the buildings were lit. Do go over and experience this wonderful heritage site. Now, let's talk about for our children, and particularly our schools who listen. And this is probably for you, Ian, is it? This question. When it comes to the sorts of things that you can offer junior schools and primary schools, if there's a school that can come and visit. And I do know schools come over to Leicester, to the Space Centre, etc. What sort of things can you offer in the way of education?
We already run a large number of school visits every year. Most schools that come want a ride, mainly on steam trains, but some like the diesels as well. They can start at any one of our stations, but normally either Loughborough or Leicester. They will travel from end to end of the line and experience exactly what you've just described, Dave. What you haven't mentioned is the fact that as the train passes over the reservoir at Swithlin, it's running through a site of special scientific interest. So there's lots of wildlife and lots of interesting plant life that the older pupils are always interested in. What we always offer as well is tours of whichever station fits in best with the curriculum needs of the school. So, for example, the spooky station you mentioned is Rothley, and on a nice sunny day like it is today, you couldn't go to a more pleasant spot, as Malcolm's already said, set in 1912. If you want a mental picture of the railway children's station, Rothley's that, and schools that use the railway children as a class reader will often come and sit at Rothley and experience what the station would be like. Similarly, older primary pupils who are looking at the home front during World War II, as I've already said, Quorn is ideal for that, because not only has it got a dig for victory garden, there's an Anderson shelter in the station yard. There, under the arches, there's a Naffy cafe full of artifacts that would have been everyday items in the 1940s. So depending on what the school wants, we try to provide. It wouldn't be fair to say we can bespoke anything, but we've got a range of periods, we've got a range of opportunities. I'll give you a couple of examples that we're currently working on. There's a Key Stage 2 history topic about trade and about how innovation in transport in particular increased import and export trade. Well, as we've already discussed this morning, the Great Central Railway was about getting goods from place to place, from the great ports of the East over to Manchester, moving coal around the country. That's what trade was all about. And the story of fish from Grimsby, who doesn't like fish and chips? Without railways like the Great Central moving fish from the coastal ports, those of us who live in inland cities wouldn't have any fresh fish to go in our fish and chips. So those are the sorts of stories that we can tell to older primary children. Interestingly, since COVID, the younger children, early years, Key Stage 1, infants, the teachers are more keen on giving the youngsters an experience, the sights, the smells, the sounds of a railway. And it's really quite heartwarming when you realise that for some of those children, they're looking out of the window and seeing for the first time animals in fields. Most of our visitors come from Leicester or Nottingham, many of them from inner city schools. So it's quite literally a breath of fresh air for some of these children to see the countryside going by. And that our volunteer guides are always really touched when they see that happening. All of these opportunities are there for families as well. We've developed a new product which brings together some of our thinking about school visits to how families can experience a visit to the railway. We realise that lots of folk these days aren't used to reading timetables. You pick up the phone and you say where you want to go, and the phone will tell you how to get there and what time to go. So we've developed a product where we will provide a family group with an itinerary for the day. It'll tell them the train timetables, where to get on, where to get off, and more importantly, what to see and experience at each step of their journey. So what the family, and this is presented in such a way that the youngsters, the children, lead the day's visit. We call it an explorer product, and at the end of the day, the children have got a activity pack stamped at each station, and they get an explorer badge. And the children have guided their parents or the adults who are with them through the journeys at the Great Central Railway.
Well, there we are, schools, head teachers, senior leaders. Here's a wonderful resource. Go over and have a look yourselves. Do a forward recce and have a look at it. Check it out because it's well worth it. We love it. We love it over there. And it is only an hour away from Peterborough. A little bit further if you're in Cambridge, but we've got fast roads. Go over and check it out and try this Heritage Railway. I'm sure there's going to be something for your children or for your family. And really, all you listeners, if you're thinking, oh, that's going to cost me, well, just think about if you go to London to watch a show. You've got, it costs you a lot of money to go to London. Then you've got a lot of money to see a show, particularly if it's a musical. It costs the earth for that. And you're in there, 2 hours? Here's a wonderful railway that can offer you a whole day of great fun, great education and time together as a family. Get over there. Now, before you're going to come back next week, gentlemen, aren't you?
We are.
Great. Which we want to talk about something else a little bit next week. We want to talk about something else in the future. But there's one question I want to talk about to ask you about the present. How difficult is it now for you, bearing in mind, we're running, you want to run steam trains. How difficult is it for you to get coal now?
Getting coal is a lot more difficult than it used to be since the cessation of mining in the UK. So it all has to be imported. And it can be imported from a number of places. And that we're using at the moment tends to come from Poland or Kazakhstan. But you can also get it from South America or even further afield. So it's not as easy. I mean, we can get it, but it's not as easy as it used to be. And of course, there is an environmental impact of bringing the coal to us. So the environmental impact of using the coal is, of course, one thing. Although the quantity that we use today of coal is, incredibly small relative to what used to be burnt previously. Heritage use of coal is tiny, really. The bigger impact, because it's not mined in the UK, is the environmental cost of having to ship it many miles across the world to get it to the UK. There can also be some challenges in getting it the right quality, because you can't just burn any old rubbish in the steam locomotive. It needs to be a decent quality steaming coal for it to be effective. And you can't use the same coal, for example, that's used in steel manufacturing or that used to be used in to be burnt in power stations. It's a different grade of coal and a much higher quality of coal that's needed for steam. So it's obtainable. We do get it. It's not cheap. It's a lot more costly than it used to be. The Ukraine war pushed up the cost quite significantly. We used to get quite a lot from Russia. Of course, we most certainly don't anymore. And that pushed up the price quite a bit. But it's settled down, but it's still a lot more than it used to be when it was mined in the UK.
I'm old enough to remember the steam trains on the line. I used to go to London 1962, 63 at Christmas. Used to go on the steam train before they all disappeared. And it was part of my infancy. It was a part of my day. So if you're a school, get over to this place. If you're a family, get over to this place. If there's a family or a school who want to get in touch with you guys, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, the first place to have a look is our website, I suggest. And we've just launched a new website, actually. So if you head to gcrailway.co.uk, you'll see on there all that we have to offer.
Specifically for schools, if they want to contact me on email, education@gcrailway.co.uk, then I'll happily pick that up and have a conversation about what we can offer.
Well, there we go, folks. Double click on the podcast. The text will open up and you're just one link away from this wonderful heritage railway. Get over there and check it out. I promise you it won't be a wasted journey. Gentlemen, I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Eddie's Launchpads is an EdStar production for Dogsthorpe Infant School.